Hi, welcome to the Worthy Physician Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Sapna Shah-Hawk, a board-certified internal medicine physician. Keep life simple. You are human. You are worthy. Remember what matters to you. Our goal is to help physicians remember this and to make it a reality through addressing various components of physician burnout via podcast. This is meant to be used as a tool to help guide physicians. It does not take place of professional medical help. Opinions reflected in this are my own. Both tell me about yourselves and who you are.
Well, we're Dr. George and Vanessa Naum. I go by the nickname of Jeep. My patients know me as Dr. Jeep. I've had the nickname since I was a little kid, and it has stuck. And then this is my wife, Vanessa. We've been coaching married couples for over 25 years, and in the last 4 years, we still do that, but we specialize in physician marriages because of all of those things that we deal with, which we know that you understand as well. And so there's a lot of our colleagues out there that have really needed some help, and so we decided that we'd focus on that.
And this year, we will be married 30 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So how did you get into coaching physician married couples?
Well, we started out in the volunteer realm, like he said, about over 25 years ago, and just saw how much it enriched our lives, and really going through that training and seeing what it does for couples. And then a few years ago, just realizing that docs are in their heads so much that, and then of course with COVID and all of the issues with the corporatization of healthcare, and because we are a physician marriage. So we worked together for over 10 years in the clinical setting. I'm not a physician, but I am an accountant, and I managed his practice, and we absolutely loved working together. But we really, really know, we think very well, the struggles and the pitfalls of working and being married in medicine.
I was raised in a physician marriage. My dad was a physician. My grandfather was a physician. Unfortunately, my exposure was a negative one with my dad. He was for lack of a better phrase, he was the original male chauvinist pig. And he really did not give my mom a lot of credit for what she did. He spent a lot of time out of the house. This was back in the 60s. And so he was out rounding, variety of different things. But their relationship was never good. And it was mostly because of him and his attitudes. And so from an early age, I knew, one, that I wanted to be a doctor, and two, that I wasn't going to treat my wife this way, and that physician marriages could work. And through training, I saw physician marriages fall apart for, what I considered to be very preventable reasons. And so it instilled in me even more while we were coaching, for lack of a better phrase, regular couples that weren't healthcare professionals. And so, it was just something from our experience as a physician couple, from living through that growing up, that it was just something that was kind of a natural thing. And all of this stuff kind of ballooned with the stress going on now. And so we're doing it full bore now.
And like, for example, I grew up in a family that we had dinner every single night. Everybody sat at the table. 6 o'clock was dinner. It was programmed. Jeep and I couldn't do that with our family because, I would leave the office around 5 o'clock, pick up the kids, come home, start dinner. He would be rounding until 7, 8, 9 p.m. at night. So we weren't the typical normal family that could sit around the dinner table and have a dinner together. What we did instead was we would go out a couple of evenings a week and with the kids. So, we at least made meal times special like that. But that's just one example of a sacrifice that we made just because of the working schedules.
So I really want to take a pause and showcase that. Dr. Jeep, what's your specialty?
Well, I was a family physician, not practicing now because we're doing this full time.
Right.
And so, family medicine. My dad was a family physician, and that's kind of where I got my desire to do that. And I was drawn to the relationships that you develop with patient families from grandparents all the way down to grandkids. And that just was something that I was really interested in, really wanted to do. I saw, how my dad related with his patients, and just, it was a really, really good relationship. And that's what I wanted to do. And it very, very fulfilling.
Yes, absolutely. I'm an internist and I have done traditional practice in the past. So I can relate to what you're saying, that you try your best to be home by a certain time, but unfortunately the family has to be on the back burner. Sometimes, not all the time, but it's hard to find that balance between home life, and you want to be there for your spouse or your kids or your the extended family.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Let me kind of give you an example of what we went through.
Sure.
It was, like you said, when I first started into practice, building my practice from scratch, I went to 5 hospitals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was making rounds before and after office hours. And so I would get up, usually start my day at 6 o'clock, get up, go to rounds at 7 and try to be at the office by 9. Vanessa was at the office, usually after having dropped our kids off at daycare. And so I would get there at 9 and oftentimes would not leave the office till 7. And it was nothing for me if I had patients in all 5 hospitals that I went to, or nursing homes as well, that sometimes I wouldn't get home till 10 or 11 o'clock. And so I'm walking through the door and I'm numb. And I'm, especially if it was a bad day, if for whatever reason, whether it was a staff issue or an administrator issue, or if it was a patient issue, or all of them together. And so you just kind of walk through the door. And my thought was, I just need to go sit down in this chair and decompress. Well, that happened for a while. And meanwhile, Vanessa's over making dinner, has kids pawing on her for her to give them attention.
I'm sure you can relate to that now, right?
All the above. What you have said and what he has said, yes.
So I'm in the chair and oblivious to all of this. And so this goes on for a while. And, Vanessa had the, I don't want to say courage, but she had the
No, I had to dig down deep.
Okay. Well, you go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, because I worked as well, I felt when I walked through the door, I was walking into my second shift
Right.
of a job, like my second job. And so when he would come in, I needed help
Right.
immediately. And he's
Right.
like, no, I need to decompress. So that was a bone of contention between us for some time until we really negotiated a way of, okay, what do we each need and why do we need it? And how can we solve this like a team? Because we are essentially a team. And if we aren't operating this marriage and family as a team, then it's going to cause disconnection between us. Correct. And so that was predominantly our attitude. Did we mess up? Of course we did. We're human, and sometimes, life just, life gets in the way. And, but we always had the determination, always still do, is, whatever it takes, and that our relationship comes first.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing was, I wasn't spending enough time with my kids, which wasn't fair to her. It wasn't fair to them. Mm-hmm. And if she hadn't have brought this up and would have allowed this to continue, I would have missed out on such a huge part. These, my babies, my watching them grow up and going upstairs, reading stories, giving them baths, tucking them in. I look back now and I get chills just thinking about it, because we have a daughter. Our oldest daughter just got married in October and she's out of the house. And
congratulations.
So, thank you. So to have missed out on all of, I could remember right now having her in a rocking chair up there and just rocking her to sleep. And I would have missed out on that. And it would have, especially now with grown kids, it would have crushed me to have missed out on that. But when you're getting bombarded, which is probably even a mild term, and then it's even worse these days, it's hard to disconnect from your work, your office life, come home, and then reconnect with your home life. And home is supposed to be a safe space, but you have to make it a safe space. It's something that is, as I know you, you have to really work at it. It just doesn't come.
Doesn't happen.
No.
Right.
You have to make a plan.
Let me ask you this. Vanessa, how did you bring up that conversation? And Doc, how did you get that insight to, and then what steps did you take to correct that?
Well, it took some time, because just like in any relationship, right? I say that I have a problem, and when you do that, you put the other on the defensive. So then you become embroiled in fighting for who's right and who's wrong. And we got caught up in that. And part of the reason why we are coaching is to prepare people and tell them, this is how we got into this problem. This is how we solved it. And, we're going to give you tips and tricks. And so therefore, we, battled back and forth. It was about who was right, who was wrong. He felt because he was a physician and he was, that it was his responsibility or that he was okay to come home and take whatever time he needed to decompress, which is in front of the television watching TV. And, after some time, I said, we really need to iron this out. What is acceptable for you? Can you come up with a time that is acceptable for you? Is 15 minutes enough? Is 30 minutes enough? What time frame is enough? And then, we agreed on that.
And from my part, the more that we talked, the more I started to become aware the same thing. He would come home, he would sit down in a chair. My mother would be in there with all five of us, at different times, and he's in there totally oblivious and aware. And I'm like, I'm doing what I said when I got was not going to allow to happen. And that realization to me with self-reflection only came because Vanessa said, we gotta do something about this. We said that when we were going to have kids, that it was going to be a team. We said that when we got married, that we were going to do this. There was not going to be any gender specific responsibilities, the traditional stuff, that we're going to do whatever it took to make our relationship work. And I was falling into that, I just come home and easy and chill out and go up to bed whenever that was, and really not participate actively in what I needed to do as a father. And thankfully, and I love her for a whole bunch of other reasons, but the fact that she had the courage to bring that up and that we were able to get through that very successfully, it was just an awesome thing. And we when we coach couples, physician couples, healthcare professional couples, we use ourselves as examples.
Sure.
In our program, everything that we talk about, every issue we talk about, there is a specific example from our own marriage that we offer to them, and how we've been able to get through that. And go ahead.
And we feel you, we know what you're going through. We got you,
Right.
Total empathy. And I'm getting chills just thinking about it, being just able to totally connect and understand where you are.
Sure. Because you've been there yourselves.
Yep.
So, Dr. Jeep, I did pick up when you kind of first introduced yourself, you said that you had noticed that in residency and early on in career, you had noticed relationships falling apart for what you thought was something that was preventable. Would you mind briefly expanding on that?
Sure. I would see in medical school, there were not a lot, but there were several students that were married, and what I saw was not spending a lot of time at home, going to the library instead of going home, not spending a lot of time with the spouse, doing things, spending too much time with students, and I. Being part of that, I understand that's part of the situation and going. But if you're going to be bold enough to be married when you're in training, you first of all, before you go into training, you go into medical school and you are married, there should be communication at that point before school starts. Because it's stressful enough in itself, but when you throw a marriage on top of that, that adds another layer to the onion. I mean, too many times, I would see that there just was not enough communication before, and there was not enough communication during. So you would hear, mostly I was hearing it from the guys who were married. Oh, my wife this, oh, my wife that. And they weren't two physician families or two med student families. It was usually just one. And, she doesn't understand enough. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, she probably doesn't understand enough because of you. You're being selfish. And so this is stuff that should have happened ahead of time. Same thing in residency, where requirements are obviously even more intense. There's, back when I was in, you were on call sometime 24 to 36 hours. And so along with your other responsibilities in the hospital during the day. And I saw the very same thing with couples.
I think what the issue is you're spending so much time at your job and or learning that you're not getting to spend the quality time with your partner, husband, significant other.
Right.
And the relationship is dying on the vine because there's nothing breathing life into it. You're essentially married to someone, but if you cannot spend time with them and nurture that relationship, grow that relationship, then it's stagnating, and typically that stagnation starts, deteriorating.
I would hear, well, what does she expect me to do? Or what does he expect me to do? This is the same issue in quote unquote regular marriages, where prior to marriage, during engagement, there's not been enough significant discussion about possible issues that are going to occur when you do get married.
And he just said it, and it's expectation.
Yeah.
What are your expectations when you marry and when, through the marriage? Don't assume that your partner automatically knows what your expectations are, because if you haven't voiced them, then they're not mind readers. They're not going to know. And as much as we think we know our spouse, it's never safe to assume anything, because we're growing our own selves every day. We're learning, we're going through personal growth. We're trying to understand ourselves, right? So when we not cut them a break and try to predict maybe a look on their face or a tone of voice or whatever, that's really not giving them or your relationship the benefit of the doubt.
Understood. I mean, the divorce rate among married couples here in the U.S. is around 50%, and it's higher for physicians. And then you have a physician couple, it's high, unfortunately.
Yes.
As trite of a expression it is, communication. I mean, if there isn't there, it's at a premium, sure. But if you have to say, okay, this day for an hour, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about whether you feel that there's a problem in your relationship or not. Maybe somebody's not had the courage to bring up what's going on. You sit down, make that time, and just focus on your relationship and say, even if it's like, oh, well, honey, I'm going to be on call next weekend. I'm probably going to be spending most of my time in the hospital. I'll try to check in, give you a call now and then. But sometimes even that basic type of courtesy communication doesn't happen. And maybe for the first couple of times there's some understanding, but then what happens is resentment, disillusionment, a lot of disses, disenchantment that could have been prevented with adequate communication.
And I think with adequate communication, you have to be intentional.
Right. You
have to be intentional with it. Like for example, okay, Jeep and I are going to be away for the day today. How many times am I going to text him just to tell him I'm thinking about him? So one thing that we did a lot when we weren't working in the same physical space was drop each other a quick text, like thinking of you, love you, can't wait to see you tonight, those kinds of things. They really mean a lot. The little things mean a lot.
When I was in training, because we were together towards I think the end of my internship, but when I was starting to see patients in the resident clinic, when I was taking a break for a cup of coffee, I would always send her a text to say, I'm thinking about you. I have a little bit of time tonight. Why don't we go out and
you called back then. No cell phones back then.
Or I would call.
He would call.
And I would say, let's go out. Vanessa's thing was, I can't. What is it? TCBY.
Oh my gosh.
The country's best yogurt, I think is what it was called. So we would go out, even if it was just for that short period of time, get some yogurt. Sometimes it was in the store, or we would sit in a car and while eating yogurt, talking about each other's day.
Just having something to look forward to.
Right.
And they're little things, but built up, little things mean a lot.
Yeah. And just, I knew that he cared. So when he walked through the door, those little things through the day had already put me in a space where I couldn't wait to see him. Instead of, oh, he didn't bother to call me today, or oh, he didn't bother to text me today, or he or she didn't respond to my text. Oh boy, they're probably in a bad mood when they walk through the door. And do you see how that can really change the first 5 minutes of that interaction when you guys walk through the door and meet each other?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
If you're expecting intimacy to happen, I mean, intimacy doesn't happen, or if your partner is upset, and you're not putting out,
really?
if you're not putting out that good bread during the day, it's going to get stale by the time the night comes around, and it's not going to happen. Intimacy starts when you get out of bed in the morning.
And it's all day long.
It's just not when the bedroom door closes.
Right.
It happens a
all
lot
the
before
time.
that. And, guys, I think, especially just don't grasp that sometimes. And so, little things, they don't have to be huge, but as Vanessa said, they have to be intentional. Because that it's intentional to do things, and that just creates a strength of connection.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you feel that energy,
yes,
and it's good.
Yes,
you put out what you, and then what you put back, what you put out.
That's
it's not just karma. It's also with love and appreciation.
Absolutely.
But it also has to come both ways.
Exactly. Because, that's another topic that we talk about.
Yeah.
Is marriage a 50-50 proposition? Well, sometimes it's not. Right. Sometimes he's giving 100% and I'm giving nothing. I went through postpartum depression. I was really a mess. He was 100% there for me. There have been times through our marriage when I've been there 100% with him. And it's really not about keeping score. It's just knowing that the relationship ebbs and flows like that. Sometimes you're going to be giving more. Sometimes you're going to be giving less. And that's just normal. That's just a normal part of married life.
Sure. But then I would also think that there's also some expectation that you can depend. And again, that goes back to setting expectations initially, but that you can actually depend and have a reliable partner. Because if there's if there's not that reliability or that and sometimes that might happen with physician couples, or even let's say somebody that's traveling a lot. If you don't have that backup, that's really hard.
Dependability is huge. One thing I would caution with dependability is to make sure if you are depending on them that you are not taking them for granted.
Sure.
I mean, we have so much on our plates these days.
Yeah.
I mean, communication is so key. Expectations. And again, I'll bring up a lack of communication before commitment. And you would be surprised, even amongst our colleagues, ask the question, have you ever thought about what you really want in this relationship? Have you ever thought about what you need, what you want, what the relationship needs? And the answers are like, not really. I've not spent enough time on that. And so that's when I say preventable. If a lot of this, even if it's uncomfortable, and we had our issues before we get married. One thing was kids, not that we were going to have them, but how many. And if you let stuff like that go because it's uncomfortable to talk about, and you think it's going to change once the rings are on, oh no. Once all the great feelings and the honeymoon period is over, and you have your work and the responsibilities of life hitting you in the face, that's going to come up again, and it's even going to be more difficult to resolve where you could have done it before. And it may be that's a deal breaker, if I don't think it would have happened with us, but in some couples, one is insistent on having kids and the other's like, no, it's not something that I really want. And that's going to be a deal breaker. If it is, maybe you shouldn't be getting married. So don't leave that off until you do get married and then have to deal with a divorce. But it happens constantly.
Yeah, don't try to change a person after you're married. That's not going to happen. You can't change a person.
Not.
No, that is correct.
They have to change themselves.
True.
But so what is some advice that you would give to physicians? And, I know that the topic of burnout has always been, it's at work. And honestly, I don't think that you can separate the work life and the home life, because it affects, whether you say it doesn't, work doesn't affect me. Yeah, losing a patient, no matter what age, that affects me no matter what. Yeah. Subconsciously, if I come home stressed, that is going to change how I interact with my kids, even though I'm trying my hardest to be pretty darn positive, because they're pretty cute, right? They're 2 and 3, and it's a great age.
Right.
So I think that, a home life can also add to burnout, and there are just so many realms of a person's being. So what advice would you have to your physician colleagues and spouses that might struggle with just being a spouse or being a significant other and with burnout?
I would recommend that, ask the questions, what really nourishes your soul? What type of self-care nourishes your soul? And I'm not talking about going to a spa day. I'm talking about, what do you think fills you up? So the day is, for lack of a better way of putting it, is draining your bucket full of resources. What do you do that fills that bucket up? And think about how you can incorporate that into your life, maybe not on a daily basis, but certainly a few times a week. And an example that I learned going through my coaching training is breath work. Breath work is so huge because we're resetting the nervous system, and also just getting the brain offline. It's bombarding us with thoughts constantly. What can we do in the moment that's going to be quick, say 16 seconds, that's going to stop that thinking process from happening? And if you're really focusing on your breath and taking that breath through your body and being mindful of, say, for example, the breath going down into your chest, that is going to help a lot with getting your brain from thinking thoughts.
And none of us are perfect,
right?
There's too much of society that expects physicians to be perfect. There's this thought that we're on a different level, and we've got it all together, or we should know all that, and they forget about the fact that we're humans.
Yes,
we're human beings, just like they are. We bleed, we love, we cry, we have all of that. And there's just like, no, we want you to be perfect. We want you to be there for us all the time. Well, if, that kind of thinking's like, if you're trying to be Superman, that's kryptonite.
Yeah.
That's going to eventually bring you down.
Yes. How Jeep and I approached that too, I think, is our relationship was our safe space. We always got recharged from each other. He, being together was the bucket filler. It wasn't, taking resources out of my bucket. And we loved doing trips together, traveling. And sometimes we were able to go for a week, sometimes 2, sometimes just for a weekend, but we made that happen. We had, our rule was, every 3 months he needed to take some time off, whether that be a week or 10 days, but he desperately needed that time off.
And that not only was for our relationship, for being away from work, but if you have kids, it's also for them. And when you go away, you don't bring your kids with you, if at all possible, because you're not spending time on your relationship. We would sit our kids down, especially when they were young. They didn't understand, and they would say, well, can we go with mommy and daddy? And I would tell them, I would say, well, there'll be a time when all of us will go on vacation. But this time is time that mommy and daddy need to spend being alone and working on their relationship. So not that word, but on our marriage, something that they would understand. And then I would say, and then we'll be back and you'll see that we're going to be able to be better parents for you. And our kids understood that. You don't say it once because they're going to ask every single time.
Right.
And then when you take them away on their own vacation and they become satisfied with that, it's just so much more enriching. I know of too many people that every time they go away, they take their kids. And if you absolutely can't find sitters, if it's okay, I get that. It's just so much harder to really spend time on what you need to spend time, because when they're there, you're spending your time entertaining them.
Well, it's couple time versus parenting time.
Right.
Yeah, family time. Yeah. And you need to have couple time.
But to our colleagues that feel like they're failures, that there's no way that they're going to make it. There's just too much that's gone over the bridge and they can't bring it back. I mean, if there's an issue, you really need to be able to speak frankly about what's bothering you. What are you struggling with? What's really dragging you down? And hopefully the partner that you're with, and you've understood this and come to know that through experience and time together, is going to sit and listen to you. And then when you're done, they do the same to you. So then you say, it's just, I can't do very much here. I'm not in a good space. You try to talk it out. And if you can't do that between the two, then you need somebody to help guide you, like us. And which happens. But so it takes that one being able to talk and being vulnerable, and for your partner to listen to you lovingly and say, it may be that you both are doing as much as you can and you need some outside help to come in and take some of the burden off of you. And that may be depending on, what type of specialty you're in and the time that it takes. And then is it well, I'm going to continue do I want to subspecialize? Do I want to do a fellowship on that? And that, if that enters into the picture, that takes even more discussion. And those are decisions that you don't make on your own. You have to make together.
Right. And so it's okay to delegate. Is
Yes.
it's okay to delegate?
Yes. And we needed help, and we weren't afraid to ask for help. Like when, I was absolutely leveled by postpartum depression, and we asked a friend, can you come and live with us for a few months? And she would do 4 nights. My mom would do 1 night, and then Jeep would do the weekends. And that was life or death. Mm-hmm. That was the life or death type of a situation that we needed to get through, because our daughter was not sleeping at night. I was exhausted. I was trying to work at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I collapsed and needed help. And
you do your relationship a disservice mm-hmm. when you refuse to be able to cry uncle. You need to cry uncle when it's time to cry uncle, and mm-hmm. Meaning that you need help. Right. And hopefully you've got, relationships with friends and family to fall back on that are going to be there for you when mm-hmm. you need it. Mm-hmm. I understand in some cases that that's not available, and I feel very bad when that's the case. But for us, mm-hmm. we had close friends that stepped in. Mm-hmm. Vanessa's mom always seemed to be there. If we ever wanted to go away for a weekend, the kids mm-hmm. couldn't wait to get out and spend time with grandma out on the farm. And because sometimes it's difficult if you're looking for a babysitter to watch what's going to be 3 kids, some will watch 1, some will watch 2, but 3, sometimes they don't want to watch 3. So you have to lean on those relationships that you have with other people. And you can't keep saying to yourself, oh, we'll get through this, I'll do more. At some point, it's like, time out. I can't do anymore.
And what just came to me, and I'll say you guys talking to physicians.
Right.
You are so programmed to not fail.
You got it.
Because failure is like death.
Right.
So you don't want to admit, while you're struggling to raise your family and work at the same time, you don't want to admit that you may be failing at both of those, because you're not superhuman. You can't be doing everything well, everything 100%. So take the pressure off of yourself. I want to give you permission to feel human. And that is what we do, is we give you all permission to feel human.
I'll tell you right there, though, that's a big phrase. That's a big phrase. And, some of the other guests I've had on here, they've used that same phrase. And very, very type A, like what Dr. Bean called us, race car drivers, always going 100 miles an hour, don't know how to stop. We're honestly, I think we're pretty efficient. We're pretty good, pretty darn good at problem solving. But when it comes to the self and knowing a stopping point, it is so hard to know.
It is.
Because we're instilled, like you said. Yeah. Keep going, keep going, keep going. They don't teach you when you're in school that you're going to be dealing with self-doubt, and you're going to be dealing with stress. They don't cover that. And if they do, they don't. Certainly when I was there, they didn't cover it enough. Yeah. And so you're kind of ill prepared when all of this starts. And like you said earlier about, when you have a patient that passes, even if it's expected, it's still, you look at yourself and you say, could I have done something differently?
Yeah.
Did I miss something? So you're always second guessing yourself. And then
Yes.
you've got the rest of society saying, well, you should. You should be second guessing yourself because you're supposed to be perfect. Well, that's a crock.
And everybody's supposed to live forever, and everybody else's health problem is my fault. But
Yeah, it is. Yes.
But I mean, these are the expectations that are placed on physicians, and then I think manure rolls downhill, so it's displaced to the family, and it's just that's not fair at all.
No, it's not. I think a huge step is being self-aware, being aware of it and saying, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop this from taking over my life, because you're so busy trying to make a living and a difference that you've stopped making a life for yourself. And this is a way of stopping that and saying, what do I really want? Not the doctor, but who am I? What do I want? If you took the physician away, if you took your ability to practice away and you are no longer a physician, who are you?
That's a great question. And
who are you?
I can answer that for myself, but I know a lot of people that cannot.
Yeah.
And that's almost scary. And then you plant that into a family, and it's, I can't fathom that. Because,
and
I mean, you know, with my kids, we goof off. I'm a big kid at heart.
Good.
So, you know, I might just say that I'm thoroughly enjoying the toys and the music and the silliness and the innocence. So
I wish I could go back there and redo that, because I have to tell you that I wasn't great at it either, because you know, I was in my head a lot. I'm a type A, but I was type A with the numbers and the business of medicine.
Right.
No, don't believe that, Doc. Don't
she,
that.
Oh my goodness. He thinks I did well, but really, yeah.
You were a phenomenal mother, and you still are a phenomenal mother. And you took care of the office, and you took care of the house. You were superwoman. Did you collapse a couple of times and need to be supported? Yes, but you had an awful lot. So I think to say you didn't do it, it's okay to be introspective and self-reflective. That's fine. You know, could things have been done a little differently? Yeah, but by and large, you could say that all the time. But I did a phenomenal job, and our kids are, you know, reflect that.
Yeah. Thank you, honey.
But see, I mean, I think that's an important thing. And I'll tell you, as a physician with a family, with kids, and a career, you always. I think this is more for women than men, and I don't mean it in a bad way. I think it's more based in our nature and DNA.
Yeah.
You know, life has changed tremendously in the last 100 to 200 years. Mm-hmm. But evolutionarily, we have not.
Correct.
So we still. I know I can be a better parent, you know, but then I look at my kids and think, yeah, but they're happy and they're well cared for. So what else could I really ask for?
It's the always thinking, and I get into it too, that we're not good enough.
Or we could be better.
Sure.
Or we could be better.
So you add that, and then you add a type A personality on top of it, and then you add a career realm, and it's overwhelming. And I know
it's a bonfire.
But on Med Twitter or on some other Facebook groups, like with physician communities, mm-hmm. I do see physician couples and physician non-physician marriages where, mm-hmm. and it's interesting because these are real struggles. Okay, mm-hmm. I'm burned out. I want to come in home, but I get home late. What do I do? And you find a lot of responses saying it's okay to bring in a housekeeper. It's okay to bring in a childcare. Mm-hmm. that need for external validity to say, I need to pull in help. It is okay. That's just it.
It's against what you've been taught.
Right.
It's against the grain.
You're
Right.
not allowed to ask for help.
Right.
You've got to figure it out yourself.
So, I mean, whatever you're saying is reflective of what I know physicians go through. And I've been there myself.
Yeah.
As I've been open on a previous podcast, having my son is what allowed me to say I need help. And not in a bad way, but in a very good and positive way, because honestly, I was scared out of my mind, reading a medical textbook of what everything can go wrong, and then being in that position, you're just like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
How do I quiet that mind? And
yeah.
Sometimes we're, because we're physicians and we have this knowledge, sometimes knowledge is not a good thing.
No, yeah. Right.
Believe me, sometimes you just need to, well, back at that time before the internet, I just needed to stay away from a medical text. No, stop. And
now it's too accessible.
Well, yeah. And Vanessa would say to me, if we were having an issue or a problem, she'd say, sometimes, you just want to try to fix me.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're trained to do. I mean, at our root, as physicians, we are coaches. It starts back then because you're coaching your patient to try to get them to buy into your treatment plan, to buy into what you think the diagnosis is. So, and then we want to try to fix that. Well, that carries over to home when sometimes it's not about fixing, it's just being a shoulder to lean on.
Right.
It's just being there.
I'd be like, honey, no.
It took a while for him to get that.
Yeah.
But I think that as a profession, it's not unusual that, that we deal with that. It's like you say, it's in our DNA. It's part of us.
Right.
And we look at it as a positive thing, which it is most of the time, but sometimes that part of us needs to stay out of it.
Absolutely. It's hard to turn off that switch, but I think
it is
being intentional, though, to know where your shortcomings are and to build on that. You learn how to, most of the time, turn that off and switch gears.
Exactly. Exactly.
So if listeners wanted to get a hold of you and look at your services, can you tell me a little bit about what you offer and your website, email?
Yes. Our website is bestfriendsagain.com. So BESTFRIENDS again, AGAIN.com.
And I'll stop you here. Vanessa came up with that for our business, but it's something that we have always believed in. We were each other's best friend before we got married. And really, if you're not each other's best friend, I don't know how you get through. I sometimes I hear, well, my best friend is my, is my girlfriend from high school, or my best friend is a guy who I went through college with. That's fine. Don't classify them as your best friend. Your best friend needs to be your spouse, and so that's where that came from and why we named it that. Okay, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So, bestfriendsagain.com. And we are on Facebook and LinkedIn. Both of us are on LinkedIn. We have a business page on LinkedIn. And our program is called 90 Days to Clarity and Connection, where we take you through the process of, and this process, by the way, is coaching. So it's educational. It is not therapy. So it's teaching you things, teaching you the tips and the tricks that we apply, that what we learned years ago and applied them throughout our life. So far, being married. For example, rules for fighting, What are the rules for fighting? But anyways, the clarity to connection is, what do I want? What do we want as a couple? Then learning how to be vulnerable with one another, because, docs
that's
have to
huge.
learn that
Yes.
all over again.
Yes.
And trust somebody, right? And learn to trust somebody, because, your head's telling you, I may not be okay, but when you're vulnerable and you admit that to somebody else and they get that and they can hold you in that space, it feels so good to be understood that way.
Yes.
So we take them through that. And then the last part of it is connection, and it's reconnecting in all realms of the relationship, including the sexual relationship.
Which is often ignored, or couples are sent somewhere else because that they don't want to talk about that. But it's obviously it's an essential part of the relationship. Statistics will say, well, if it's good, it's 15%. If it's not good for whatever reason, then it's taking up 80% of your relationship in a bad way. So
in examples, it's just, sex isn't just physical. It's not about physical. It's not about positions, but it's like, for example, the question, how do you want to feel during that time? That's a pretty powerful question. What do you mean, how do I want to feel during that time? Have you thought about how you want to feel during sex? So it's bringing up questions that trust me, you would never have thought about. And once you go through that and understand how deep that can become, it's powerful.
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Wow.
So each of the, there's 3 sections, each of them builds on the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, and then I have a book. My book is What's Forever For, a Physician's Guide to Everlasting Love and Success in Marriage. And so some of our program comes from that. Mm-hmm. The book is, no matter what your socioeconomic background,
what education level.
I wrote it like I was sitting talking to a patient. And the way I've always thought about is, if a patient comes to me and if they're not educated about their diagnosis, they don't know what it is, they don't understand their treatment plan before they've left the office, then I haven't done my job. Right. And so that's how I looked at writing this book. And it's, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, won a couple awards with it. And nice. So it's good, and highly recommend it to everybody. But that's incorporated into the program as well.
Mm-hmm. Number one, physicians, we don't ask for help. We get caught up in our jobs. We get caught up in our head, and it's incredibly hard for us to be vulnerable just because of everything we had just discussed. We have to be 100% all the time, every time. And it's just
yes. And you know what else? I heard someone say, and I thought it's absolutely true. That for a physician to have gone through medical school, internship, residency, and come out of that without some type of a trauma, intentional or otherwise, is to think that they haven't. Because think of the change. You went from being your emotional self to learning how to keep everything in, because that's just what was expected. If you got something wrong, I know, especially in Jeep's day, you stood, it was like a firing squad. So you couldn't become emotional. So you had to learn to shut all of that down. And that's what we get back to. Who are you and were you before you went down that path? And let's get you back in touch with those emotions so that you can feel again.
Absolutely.
I mean, physicians who've had to go through a malpractice suit, and if it's been an unfavorable thing, talk about a trauma. Oh my gosh, or the threat of that, day in and day out. Talk about people not wanting you to be human. Oh my gosh. So that's part of things that we see too. That's out there.
Yes.
So yeah.
Had my son, I started scaling back, and then we had my daughter, and I decided to go part-time. So I worked 3 days outpatient and 4 days off with my kids, and it's fantastic. And during the pandemic, since we've had to slow down, started getting back into my other interests that I had before medical school. And I'll tell you, it's some other things are resurfacing, and it's nice. It's nice.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. Yeah. Yes, I do. And but I needed the time to slow down.
Right.
And address it and say, what was this like? What did I like before medical school? How do I want to spend the next 20 years?
Right. And
I really give you a ton of credit for being able to self-reflect on that, because it's not a common thing. It just isn't.
No, thank you. I lost one of my closest friends to suicide.
Oh my gosh.
So, and
physician,
yeah.
Oh wow.
And so that really prompted, and there's a podcast episode, it's unnumbered, and it's just titled Dr. Bicker. And she was the original inspiration for this podcast. So I mean, it's really something that makes you stop and think, and if somebody doesn't stop and think, then they miss the whole point. And that's something I try to discuss with the residents and medical students with whom I work. It's, hey, look, you can be a physician, but if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. It's okay to say no.
Right.
And it's not selfish to put self-care first.
That is an amazing sentence.
That's a
right there. It's not selfish to put self-care first.
Wow, really well said.
Because I mean, as a healer, even the Native Americans, right? All healers of different cultures, they do have a way of replenishing their reserve. Otherwise, you open yourself up to negativity, whether it be spiritual, mental, physical.
Yep.
You can't do it all.
No.
So if you don't want to be on that committee, say no. What are they going to do? Fire you? They're doing you a service. You don't want to work for a place like that.
No, absolutely not.
No. Now, I don't know where y'all are located, but here in the Midwest, I'm in a pretty sweet spot. But it's taken me 2 or 3 moves to get here.
To get there, yeah. Such a pleasure being with you today.
Yes, you as well. Thank you both so much for your time and all your insight. Thank you for joining us today. This concludes the podcast. Subscribe, tell a friend, follow us at www.theworthyphysician.com. Remember, you are worthy, you are human. Take care.
Start again the second time.